What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CCV HSM YouTube channel. Super happy that you're here. And before you do anything, I would love for you to subscribe and hit the little bell so you can get notifications about when new content is released weekly. We are putting out multiple things a week to keep you entertained and encouraged in your faith. So we hope that this channel, this place, is a place where you can come to knowing that you can be encouraged and knowing that you can be pointed in the right direction when you're looking and trying to grow in your faith. And if it is ever encouraging, we hope that you share it with those around you, hoping that it can benefit them as well. Now, I want to get started by asking sort of an interesting question, and that is, if you have a house with multiple levels, maybe multiple staircases, if you're in a room and you hear someone walking down the steps, do you know who is walking down the steps simply by the pattern or the rhythm of the steps that are being taken? I remember growing up, if I was ever in trouble and I was in the den, which was on our middle floor of our house, I was in the family room or the den, and if I was in trouble and I heard someone walking down the steps, I would wait, and I could tell if it was my mom, my dad, or one of my two brothers walking down the steps, and I knew whether I should stay or leave simply by hearing the pattern of their steps. And I want to ask you, how do you walk down the steps? And up the steps? Do you skip a step? Do you skip two? Has anybody ever slid down face first, like on their belly, just being absolutely ridiculous? And I'm sure while you've been stuck home during quarantine, I'm sure you've improvised how you've gone up and down the steps. But what I want to get to is the feeling of, this is one of the scariest feelings ever, of slipping on the steps. Have you ever been walking, maybe you're carrying something, or maybe the lights go out and you can't see where your foot is going, but you just, maybe it's the step right here and your foot just barely nicks the edge and you just feel that jolt of adrenaline go all the way through your body. It is one of the scariest feelings for me. Even though I know there's a step about 5 to 6 inches from that, my whole life just kind of flashes before my life. Or before my eyes, sorry. And I just feel like sometimes in this isolation, in this quarantine, what we're going through, it can feel like we are almost doing that daily. We are walking down the steps blind. We are missing steps, not sure where the next thing kind of is. And when that happens, when life feels that way, it doesn't just feel that way for the sake of it being like that. It can feel like God is leaving us in the dark or leaving us to figure out the next step on our own. Like for me, I'm trying to plan what's going to happen for students in the summer, in the fall, 2021. But I don't know what those next steps are, and it can almost seem like we're trying to live our life in the dark, not knowing what the next step is. And sometimes that's where a lot of people lose their faith. But thankfully, that's not the case with God. God has not left us in the dark, and He has actually encouraged us in a huge way. Now I want to jump into what is the second week of our I Am series. Now, the reason it's called the I Am series is because Jesus, when He was on this earth, He made multiple statements, all beginning with the phrase, I am. And what He would do is He would finish these statements with metaphors or examples that gave us insight into who He was, that would help us learn Him better and to know more about Him. So last week, we looked at how Jesus referred to Himself as the bread of life. He said, I am the bread of life. And what's interesting is that He said this right after He fed thousands of people by doing a miracle. And we talked about how Jesus, in saying this, He meant that He's the very thing that we need to feast on. We need to feed ourselves with the truth of who He is. Just like we physically need to eat every day to sustain our physical bodies, we need to feed on the truth of who Jesus is to spiritually grow and to spiritually stay connected with Him. But this week, the second week of the I Am series, Jesus gives us insight more so into who He is when our lives are kind of unsure of the next step and when we kind of feel like we're in a dark place. Jesus gives us a statement that gives us insight into that. And so what I want to do before I say the statement, I want to set the scene. And this is kind of what happens. Jesus is teaching in a synagogue, in a temple, and He is talking to His people. He's being Jesus. He's being awesome. People are knowing Him as a person who is breaking social barriers, because for the longest time, and this is super important, for the longest time people had a super strict religion of you having to be perfect, having to be holy, having to follow the laws, having to never mess up, having to always be clean, just like super rigid religion. But Jesus he was trying to break that barrier by bringing in the concept of grace. And even though we may not be perfect, we may not act the best way, we may make mistakes, there's this thing called grace, and he was bringing that into the picture. So he was teaching in a synagogue, and right in the middle of it, the doors burst open. And these people called Pharisees that we talked about last week, they drag in this woman who was literally caught red-handed. She was caught red-handed in the act of adultery. And they bring her before Jesus. And this is what they say. All right, so just imagine this happening. This is John 8, 4 through 5. They say, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. Now, in the law of Moses, it commands us to stone such women. What do you say?" And what the Pharisees were doing here, it was interesting because they were trying to catch Jesus on a double standard. They were trying to catch him saying something that they could use to condemn him with. Now, I want to ask, have you ever been caught red-handed? Have you ever been that woman who has just been like, you have no explanation, it wasn't a misconception, like you literally were caught red-handed? I remember distinctly in 4th grade, like it was yesterday, it was a hot summer day, and for some reason I was on this kick of just fruit punch Capri Suns. That's all I wanted. I would put them in the freezer and I would mix them up so they'd be like a slushie. I would just always have like multiple of them a day. And for some reason I had a super strong craving for one. And so I went and I asked my dad, "Hey Dad, can I have a Capri Sun?" For some reason, just like us kids, we never know why our parents say no to certain things. He's like, "No, you don't need one right now." And I was like kind of bewildered, like, why can't I have a Capri Sun? So he says no. An hour later, I asked my dad again, "Hey Dad, I still really want a Capri Sun. Can I have a Capri Sun, please?" "No, you don't need one right now." Yeah, just not understanding why. An hour later, I asked him, "Dad, can I have a Capri Sun?" He says, "Pete, stop asking me." And so what do you think I did? I went and I gave my mom the biggest hug, the biggest kiss on the cheek. I told her how much I loved her. And I said, "Mom, can I have a Capri Sun?" "Of course, honey, go right ahead." Yes. Got my Capri Sun, went into the laundry room, that's where our pantry was, grabbed it, because we didn't have any in the fridge because my dad didn't let me. And so I grabbed one out of the laundry room, stuck the straw in it, took my first big sip, and when I opened my eyes, my dad is standing at the laundry room door, mouth open, just appalled at my disobedience and me just being a terrible human being. I just wanted a Capri Sun. Totally understandable. And for some reason, the first thing I said was, "Mom said I could." And as truthful as that was, it didn't make the situation even better. Even though it was truthful, it didn't sound good. And even though I was being honest, it was an unfortunate situation. And what's interesting is that Jesus, regardless of what he said to the Pharisees, it wouldn't sound good to them because they were convinced that he was trying to do something wrong. They were convinced that he was trying to uproot their power as religious leaders. And so Jesus was in a tough situation. But what I love about Jesus' position in the situation is this. The woman who was caught in adultery, she had no answer. She had no defense. She was completely caught red-handed, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a matter of perspective. She had 100% done something wrong. So either way, in this dark situation, Jesus has a decision to make. And either way, in this woman's dark mistakes and her lifestyle, she does not see a way out as she is currently faced with the guilt of her past and her current mistakes. And what I want to point out is that there are few places in my life and in your life, whoever's watching this, there are few places in your life that are more dark than the places of shame and guilt and self-hate. And sometimes we can feel so trapped in that area of our life by ourselves, just by our own thoughts and the way we talk to ourselves. And when people outside of us place those boundaries even more so honest, it feels like there's never a way out of that darkness. There's never a way out of the shame and the guilt that we constantly feel. But what I want to make sure you understand is that you're not the only one who understands that darkness. Jesus understands who you are, what you've been through, and he understands how you feel when you're in that dark area. So much so that he does for you what he did for this woman. And I want to read to you. This is John 8, 4 through 11. This is a little bit, it's like 7 or 8 verses, but I want to read it to you, and I want you to imagine Jesus doing this for this woman in front of the Pharisees. This is John 8, 4 through 11. Again, they said, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law of Moses, it commands us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" Jesus, he bent down and he started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and he said to them, "Let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw the stone at her." Again, he stooped down and he wrote on the ground. And at this, those who heard began to go away, one at a time. The older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and he asked her, "Woman, where'd they go? Where are they at? Has no one condemned you?" The woman, I'm sure, looked around, kind of bewildered by everything. "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." And it was after this miraculous display of grace that as Jesus was standing before more Pharisees and defending who he was and why he does what he does, he says this to them, John 8:12. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Now, this second I am statement from Jesus about being the light of the world, it doesn't just sound nice and it doesn't just roll off the tongue. Jesus being the light of the world introduced God as someone who would be the light to anyone and everyone who felt like they were going through a really dark time. You see, Jesus brought hope to that woman. Jesus brought light and brought love to that woman. He brought inclusion to her, which was something completely new that she had always had to fight for love. She had to fight for inclusion, and Jesus simply was that to her. He was the light in that incredibly dark situation, and Jesus wants to be that light for you, regardless of what you have been through or what you're going through right now. And even though Jesus, and this is also super important, even though Jesus is our light, he is our light in dark times, it doesn't mean we're not going to go through dark times. It doesn't mean we're not going to have difficult situations, but it does change the way that we do navigate our way through dark times. Instead of sitting in our darkness and reaping on our own self-doubt, self-hate, self-guilt, self-discrimination, we can focus on Jesus, who will bring light to our dark situation and will allow us hope within it. My takeaway for you is that I want you to think about what Jesus said to that woman. After he stood up for her, after he was a light to her, in her darkness, what did he do? Jesus gave her direction. The last thing he said to her was, "Go and leave your life of sin." And my point for you, my one point, this simple video and this simple message is that even in your darkness, you can have direction. Even in your darkness, you can have direction. Even when you don't know what to do or how to approach a situation, trusting in Jesus will actually bring you close enough to him to where you can see your way to navigate through the darkest of times. And I love what someone said in another part of the Bible. This is in the Psalms, in Psalm 119, the longest chapter in the Bible, Psalm 119, 105. This person's talking about God, and he says, "Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path." Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path. And I love that because it shows us that it is in God's very nature, his very being, everything he's about is about guiding us, showing us the way, the best way for us. Even though we think we know everything, even though we think we know what's best for us, trusting in Jesus and focusing on him will put light on whatever we're going through right now. Even though we're stressed about the future, even though we're not sure of what our next step is going to be, focusing on Jesus right now will give us life and light right now. And I'll never forget, I want to close by telling you about a time when I was unsure of my next step. I was about to graduate from college, and I was super nervous, didn't have a job, didn't have a plan, didn't have anything, and I was really nervous about the next 3 to 5 years. It's a typical thing for college grads to worry about, and I remember talking to one of my best friends, and he, as I was expressing my nervousness and frustration, he asked me a simple question. All he said was, how bright are the headlights in your car? I was like, bro, I'm trying to confide in you about my future, my nervousness, and my anxiousness. You're asking me about the headlights in my car? And after we talked a little bit, the point he was trying to make was that, see, I had a 3-hour drive from High Point, North Carolina to Millikan College, 3-hour drive to my college. And the last hour of that drive was super, super windy roads. And sometimes I would have to drive that at night. Sometimes I would have to drive it in the snow. And the point he was making is that my headlights were perfect for the situation and the path right in front of me. It didn't matter what turn I was taking 50 miles down the road or 100 miles down the road or even 5 miles down the road. The next 50 feet is all I needed to trust Jesus with. And what was cool is that when I trust Jesus for 50 feet, he takes me another, and he takes me another. And eventually, when you learn to trust Jesus with being the light of your world, the light of your life, then when years down the road, someone asks you for directions, they ask you for help, you're going to be able to pull out the roadmap of your life and show how God has been with you, shown you, directed you, and been the light of your life through all the navigations of your life. And you can show that to them, and your life will be a testimony of how Jesus is the light of the world, and you get to be the voice of that. Jesus wants you to be the voice of that so that you can point others to him. I've been loving this study on the I am statements of Jesus, and I'm super excited about the video that's coming up next. So again, if this has encouraged you in any way, be sure to share it, comment, let us know what kind of content you would like for us to put out, and just let you know I'm praying for you guys. I miss you guys. Leaders and I talk about you every single day. We love you. Can't wait to see you again. Stay tuned for more comment. Be sure to hit the subscribe. See you next week.